Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of The Usual Place. Following the COVID-19 pandemic, hybrid work arrangements were considered the future of work. Now these days, employers are saying no. Last week, the National University of Singapore raised some eyebrows when it was reported that all full-time staff at the institution would have to work from the office 5 days a week, starting October 1st. Now, this follows moves by big organizations, both here and internationally, like Grab and Amazon, which have announced strict return to the office mandates. So it's a debate we've been having since the pandemic. Should people be at their desks or should they be allowed to work from home as long as they deliver results? And if employees are pushing back, why are employers insisting on making them go back to the office? Now, to help me answer those questions, I have Ives Tay, a workforce development consultant. Now, you're in training and development, and you put policies in place to help companies develop employee skills.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and next to you on the couch, I have Nicole Chua, and you're the Director of Workplace Consulting and People Strategy Lead in Asia Pacific at JLL. And what you do is you actually help companies shape and design their workplace experiences and manage their employee engagement.
That's correct.
You have a lot to say about work from home and return to the office mandates. But I want to start with, why is this happening? Because many employees will say, we can work from home, so why do you need me in the office? So maybe, Nicole, you want to kick us off today?
I think the future of work has really kind of like taken like a new slant, right? I think it's no longer about where do I work. I think a lot of employees are now asking, when do I work and why do I work? So I think this shift in the conversation gives rise, I guess, highlights that their expectations are shifting. And I think the call for flexibility is really putting, I guess, leaders, at a very challenging standpoint in terms of managing this flexibility, and in conjunction with operational requirements, because business needs are quite different. Not every role can have the same amount of flexibility. So then how do you then create a policy that makes sense for everyone, across a big organization? But I guess if I bring back to the point where do I work is no longer quite important, because we do know that in-office experience does give a lot of benefits. But the flexibility in when I work and also the purpose of work, I think that is what calls for a lot more understanding and I guess a lot more alignment. And once you can achieve that, then we're in a happy place, because a lot of our study has shown that happiness at work, right, really comes from this level of trust. So alignment equals trust, and I think when this is not reached, hence people get dissatisfied. So I think the question is, how can we help employees achieve that level of perception of flexibility, and how do we make sure that leaders are listening and also having that conversation appropriately?
I mean, that's a great summary of what we want to discuss today. Do you have any thoughts about this seeming disconnect between what employers want and what employees want?
Yeah. I think on the employer's part is more of a perception issue as well as a control matter. So many employers may perceive that the employees are working from home and they may not exactly be working, which is perhaps true for a few bad hats, but I think for the majority of employees, they do their part even if they're working from home or elsewhere, right? But there's always this inkling that, where are my employees? I don't see them in the office. I'm not sure whether they are working or not, right? So there's this perception matter and also control over the employee's time. So usually the reasons for getting people back to the office is, it's going to increase productivity, it's going to increase innovativeness. But the thing is, where is the evidence that bringing people fully back to the office does actually increase productivity and innovativeness?
So I want to ask, is this a step back from what we achieved because of the pandemic in terms of work, right? Is this a step back in how we think about work?
I don't think so. Definitely it's not a regression. I think, just to Ives' point, right, I think a lot of our data points do kind of give us evidence that in-office presence does give rise to collaboration. Things like brainstorming, problem solving, relationship building, there's a lot of benefits. However, when you zoom into the topic of productivity, it does also show us that in-office productivity and out of office productivity both has its benefits as well. So then how do we honor both levels of productivity? I think that's the question here. And I think right now, this is not a step back, because if leaders can cannibalize this opportunity to have better conversations and to better design what does collaboration look like, actually, most people think that collaboration can just happen without design, but you are wrong. You actually have to design intentionally for people to come together and facilitate that output in a better way. And then how do we actually effect more inclusion in the different types of focus work that can happen? So all of us work differently. Like for myself, doing focus work really can happen in an open space right in front of the barrister. That's how oddball I am. But that's not to say that I am not doing productive work. As opposed to my colleague who needs focus work in a closed environment and away from the crowd. So I think this gives rise to a lot more texture to what productivity looks like, and also to, be one step closer to really building that inclusive environment that we all talk about, but we never seem to kind of quite get there.
So I'm hearing two things from you, which I want to touch on both. And the first one is really about what is considered productive and where you are. And the second one is about who we are as employees now, right? And we'll get back to it. But in terms of the productivity thing, which I want to touch on, it's what are you saying that we are more productive in the office versus at home, or is this something that's a perception thing that leaders have and employees say I'm productive at home and leaders think I'm productive in the office? Like, where are we at with that?
What if I tell you that it can happen in both places? So that's what really is the reality. And I think leaders themselves also accept that productive work can be done at home. They are not taking away that fact. But I think what they want to do is to bring people more together. Probably the starting point, the desire is to have more cohesion. And I think they want to put in their best effort in kind of like enhancing the culture. And of course, culture gives rise to innovation. It gives rise to performance. I think really that was most leaders' starting point. But how they execute that communication and that strategy, that's where it sometimes can fall flatter than what we desire to see.
I want to get Ives' thoughts on this. Are you a work from home advocate or work from anywhere advocate, or do you feel like people need to be in the office, which is what Nicole's?
The best is the mix of both worlds. Right? It's a hybrid arrangement, which a lot of companies are now actually doing. So they had a taster of fully work from home during the COVID time when nobody's supposed to go back to the office. So that was sort of a blessing in disguise, because flexible working arrangement was already there before COVID came about. But companies were very hesitant, right? Because they're very traditional, or you need to be in the office. So the COVID actually forced a lot of companies to try it out, because they were forced to try it out. And then a lot of them realized that it seems to be working quite well, flexible working arrangement. They don't really need to be in the office all the time, right? So for myself, I will advocate for a hybrid arrangement, right? It could be 3 to 4 days work in the office, 1 or 2 days work from home. I think that is fine. And for myself, I have a taste of both, being an employee in the past and now more of a self-employed person, fully flexible. So I find that the way of working, and when we talk about productivity, right, I don't think people can be productive in 7 hours blocks. In the office. It doesn't work that way, right? Our attention span is probably only a few minutes, actually. So if you work from home or somewhere else, the individual can actually break up their working blocks into smaller bits. And that actually increases productivity, because there's no wasted time in between. I work for 2 hours, solid 2 hours, and then I do my own stuff for another hour. I come back to work for another 2 hours block. That actually, for myself, I feel actually increases productivity.
So I'm with you, but I think what raises eyebrows is everybody needs to be back in office 5 days a week. And I was going to ask Nicole, based on what you said, like, do I need to be in the office 5 days a week for innovation and collaboration to happen? And like, I can do it 3 times a week. And also, do I need to be there like all the time in the office? And I have done it too, previously before COVID, right, in the workplace. So what's your thoughts about the 5-day thing? Like,
I think with any policy, when it sounds rigid, I think a lot of explanation needs to come with it. So I think at this point, we are not quite sure when NUS shared the 5-day policy. Are there accompaniments, in terms of flexibility? Is there autonomy for different teams to look at it differently, or to design the 5-day activation, in a way that suits their roles, right? So that part we are not sure. But I do figure that this blanket 5-day, obviously the reaction is going to be quite negative, because it just feels like it's presence more than purpose, right? So I think ultimately we need to go back to the drawing board and ask, like you said, how do we design the 5 days in the office to be most meaningful for us? Because from our study, we also share that people are not resisting going to office, and people are not resisting work. But I think people are resisting going to office for not a meaningful enough reason. And they don't get that ROI in making that commute to the office. Traffic can be bad, and it annoys us, just to make it in that right timing. But if there's flexibility in timing, flexibility in time boxing, flexibility in how we meet and how we transact or how we discuss, I'm sure it will be happy 5 days, right? So
what do both of you see as a meaningful interaction in the office?
Ives?
I guess meaningful interaction would need to be actually planned. It just doesn't happen by chance, right? So if I call you back to the office, I should give you perhaps a list of things I would like to discuss with you, right?
Okay, so there needs to be like agenda points
Yes,
versus
agenda,
like saying like, oh, let's chat.
Correct. Yes. So that's why it comes back to the meaningful part. So why are you calling me back to the office?
Yeah.
What do you want me to do? Is there an outcome we would like to achieve? Are we going to come together, brainstorm on something, or develop a physical prototype of something which really requires you to be physically back in office because you're actually designing a physical prototype of sorts? So that makes sense, and people will be encouraged, right? And they will look forward to going back to the office for that.
Yeah.
But if you are just mandating, telling me, oh, you're coming back to the office 5 days a week because I tell you to do that. So
And
that creates resentment.
Yeah, I think that's the sense that people are getting, right? It's like, it's a very top down, it's like, because I say so kind of thing, right?
Yeah. So I really do have to agree. I think in-office days need hyper design. And it doesn't have to be the big things. It doesn't have to be the special training or whatsoever. Even down to meetings, it really needs to be designed and thought through, like who are the attendees, what kind of room, what kind of space, what kind of technology that will really not frustrate us, but facilitate our discussion down to that level. So I think for us, going into office, we really need to take on more of that designer role and really be respectful of each other's time as well, because we want to achieve like more output with less time consumption, like because our attention is just not that long to begin with. And then besides the intentional design pockets of interaction, I do believe that then what you can gain is the undesigned serendipitous kind of interaction as well. Those generally become the most memorable one, when you bump into somebody and then when you make that small talk and the connection. So yes, both have to come hand in hand. So you have to anchor with the hyper design interaction, then you free yourself to then network with the rest of your colleagues. I think that connector attribute is really one of the skill set that all of us need to embrace in the new workplace.
What do you guys say to leaders, executives on management level who say, I need to see my team in the office?
Then we'll ask them, why do you need to see us? Ask them, put them on the spot, make them answer that question.
Okay, and from, so it's a two-way thing, right?
Precisely.
Yeah. Okay.
You need to have that courage to have that dialogue with your leaders. I think they are also human beings. They are also struggling and they also have their challenges, right? Because not only do they need to lead, they need to anticipate and they need to walk the talk as well. So yeah, break the ice, bring them on your side, have that conversation. Why not?
What is, so hearing what you said about like these moments that we create in the office, right? Can we be collaborative when we are remote, like over a Zoom call? Possible? We did it. Okay, so I think the argument is always we did it. We did it during COVID. So can we still be collaborative while being remote? Maybe if I'm in Bali and you're here.
This is definitely possible. Like what you mentioned, during the COVID time, we did it, right? And productivity didn't collapse, right? Or drop. So we did it. Maybe it's not as good as some form of or portion of physical interaction, but we still did it, which is why a hybrid arrangement works. Perhaps we'll do some discussion online, and then when we need to really come together to do something physical, we'll come together. Right? So I guess it's always based on what's the end objective, what's the outcome you actually want to achieve, and what's the best way to get it.
So, Nicole, you mentioned the C word, which gets people excited or upset. So it's about culture, right?
Yeah.
Workplace
I was
culture.
thinking which C word are
Which
you
C word?
talking
Culture,
about?
culture.
Yeah.
So it's about what you said, right? Like the water cooler chats or the office gossip or, kind of building that camaraderie, right? I can sort of get behind that because I do want to see my colleagues, most of my colleagues in the office, but do I need to interact with them 5 days a week? Like, what is this culture that we're talking about that we need to build in the office that maybe some people might be like, no, I don't need this thing?
I think just caveat, I am not advocating that we need to be in the office 5 days, but taking a balanced approach. I think culture is basically consistent behavior that you can observe, right? That means you can see or you can actually quantify. Then that gives rise to that feeling, that emotion. And then some call it sense of belonging, some call it identity. So I think it all boils down to how well can you observe what's being done or who is doing it. Then you can elicit that feeling that, do I really belong here? So ultimately, there's no right or wrong. It's like if 3 days achieve that culture building, fine. If 4 days, 5 days, some teams come together once in a quarter. So really it's about making sure that those behavior can be observed. And if distributed teams work largely virtually, then they have to work harder to ensure that these behaviors come true. Hence, there are teams when they work virtually, there is a no camera off policy. Because I need to, bloody see your face, to know that you are real and that you are there, And there are mechanisms around how to make sure that culture building works. But I think it starts from what the leadership also kind of like interprets this culture building to feel like and to look like. So first and foremost, there must be some consistency. Then there must be some repeatability. Then people trust that this will be sustained, and then they will have a certain amount of feelings. So that's why a lot of our client organizations always ask us, Nicole, how do we create that sense of belonging? That's that intangible, priceless feeling that we want to create. And then they have all these policies. So we need to help them link up. What you say is what you mean, is what you do. And all these things need to come together. If not, culture is not going to happen.
And it can be done in person or when people work from home as well?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Ives, you mentioned bad hats earlier. Is this return to the office mandate kind of reaction to employees who combine work and personal time? And by that, I mean like people who go to yoga on
Bali
time.
for your...
And Bali. I've never done it. I promise I've never done it. But they do things like run errands in the middle of the day or, they schedule something personal during the work days.
So that goes back to the perception issue I mentioned earlier. So there could be a perception by the leaders, the managers that, my employees is skiving at home or somewhere else, holidaying. So that's a trust issue, right? And I think the main thing is that the way of management needs to be changed, right? As in, people or leaders need to manage by outcomes or by objectives rather than manage by time. Right? So if I give a staff a piece of work, I give them a timeline, set some expectations, and I leave them to do their job because I trust them. Right? How they do it and when they do it, where they do it, I'm not really bothered as long as they can give me the outcome at the end of the timeline. I think that is fair for both parties.
Nicole, have you heard bad hats, stories of bad employees who are like take advantage of the work from home?
Obviously there are, but I think it goes back to accountability. And I do truly advocate that not only do you need to thrive at work as a person, you need to thrive in life as a person. So I think any workplace or any employer shouldn't not support an employee if they're also trying to be the best person that they can, outside of work. So then comes back to trust. I think there is no stopping us from running errands and whatnot. But I think it's the level of transparency. Do we give a shout out to our team and say, I'll be offline for a while. If you need to reach me, this is what is going to happen. So back to the team culture. And I think more autonomy or more empowerment needs to be given to team managers, because this middle layer, this group of people are so important, because they are almost running like this orchestra of team members, right? 10 different members, 10 different personalities, 10 different stages of lives that they are going through. The manager, just like being a producer, needs to know all these moving parts and need to know intimately actually what works best for them and create that recipe. So there is the company culture, then there's the team culture that we're talking about. And I think not enough has been done for team managers, and people don't become managers or good managers overnight. They need to be empowered, they need to be trained, and they need to also be given almost like coaching skills to be able to coach this football team, right? That really come from different backgrounds, different needs.
Because now we're seeing people as individuals. So before this whole debate erupted kind of thing, it was just like everybody just had to follow the rule, right? Which is you just come back to the office. But now you have caregivers, not that they didn't exist before, but people just generally tend to follow the general workplace culture, right?
Yes.
But now you have people who want to be at home because they are caregivers, or people who are neurodivergent, or the workplace doesn't, again, not that they weren't before, but everybody just followed before, right? But now people are coming to say, I need a specific workplace type, or I need to do this at this time kind of thing, or I work better at night. So are you saying that managers now need to cater for this?
I think so. Managers need to be empowered to be able to also kind of get the best out of their team, right? I don't think it's a case of managers catering. Managers also benefit when their team members thrive, because then when they are engaged, they perform. So it's a very equal part recipe, right? I think you want the most out of your team, but you also need to invest in your team. And sometimes these investments are not the expensive ones, but the ability to just listen and customize. And I think one thing that I wanted to talk about really is not about equality at workplace. We are not saying that one policy fits everyone, right? It's about equity, By understanding the policy, we have, access to equal rights to customize it, to our needs, or negotiate, or, just like kind of like find some compromise that will really suit us. So sense of equity needs to be felt at all times, because if not, then people will just get angry and frustrated. Yeah, there's no way to be equal at any situation. In life, we are not equal, right?
Okay, it's hard truth there.
Yeah.
But I want to ask, when companies in Singapore demand that employees come back, it kind of sort of doesn't align with what the government is pushing with, like flexible work arrangements.
Yeah.
Where do you see this going? Like, is the 5-day work week going to be the new normal?
Yes, so that is a tension that I think the government should start looking at, right, urgently, because right after COVID, I think employers were still quite open to flexible working arrangements. It's just that over, I think, the past 3 to 4 years, companies are start to pushing back and mandating their employees go back to office on a full-time basis. Right? But governments, including Singapore, has actually implemented these flexible work arrangements kind of guidelines for companies, which is acknowledgement that flexible working arrangement actually works for both parties, both the employers as well as employees. Right? And I think it is actually companies, especially in Singapore, that actually mandating return to the office are actually quite misaligned with our government's position or signaling that they should be more open to flexible work arrangements. Right? Of course, there'll be some companies who said, yes, these are guidelines, we have to follow the guidelines, which means they will need to entertain flexible working arrangement requests from the employees. But we'll deal with it on a more official basis, which means that, okay, our blanket mandate that everybody returns to the office, but we may have a policy that you can still request, right? Because the government's guideline is that you
can ask, right?
Yes. But that brings us to another question. But why do that if you already currently or previously already had some kind of flexible working arrangement? Why go through all the hassle, the paperwork, processing all the thousands of requests, entertaining appeals and disputes? So it doesn't make sense to me.
What does it signal to SMEs particularly? Because if like there are institutions with which anyways is quite big, I think they have like about 12,000 staff. If big institutions like this are mandating staff come back, what would incentivize like smaller companies to continue offering hybrid or flexi work?
I think more so you get to benefit from that. I think flexibility now is no longer just a perk, right? It actually can be used as a lever for you to attract talent. So why not? If the big boys are saying that, 5 days, then I guess the smaller companies do benefit from offering flexibility. And that's where, you can probably even attract talents that used to be working with big institutions. Now there might be a shift, because I think from our research we also see that actually quite a number of employees are willing to make the shift of employment in the bid for flexibility. I think as high as 60% of them are willing to do the shift.
Because this is now like a want in my job scope, right? Like
Yeah.
I need that flexibility.
Correct. Like I said, it's no longer just a perk, right? It's almost quite top of mind when you look at your options. So then as an employer, how do you use that, in your talent acquisition strategy?
So clearly employees want this. They want the hybrid work, or they want the option at some point to work from home, right?
Yeah.
Then when companies mandate that employees have to come back more than they want to, aren't they breeding unhappy employees in this way? So so I will come back, but I will be upset about it. What do you make of that?
Yeah, and that actually contradicts the claim, or the employer's claim, that, by making you come back, we increase productivity and innovativeness, right? So when employees resent the fact that they have to go back so often, will they actually be more productive or less productive? Or will they be more innovative or even less innovative? Because I don't even feel good going back to the office. It's likely my performance will not be as good.
Yeah. Because there's always a problem, right? If I have to struggle to get to work with the traffic commute, and then by the time I get to work, if it's raining, like today, then it's like, I have to get through all that muck and then get to the office. I'm not in a good place to start work, when I could be at home and I could have started earlier,
And another thing about innovativeness, because employers claim that, by getting all of you together back in the office, there'll be more interaction and innovation. But innovation requires a high level of trust, because in order to innovate, you must allow them to fail, because they come up with new things which may or may not work.
Yeah.
Usually it doesn't work, right? You'll fail a lot of times. So they need to feel safe, they need to feel trusted. But mandating them to go back to the office without giving them a proper reason or meaning why they should be going back, where's that trust? So without that trust, how are you going to get innovativeness?
Yeah, and I want to add that if you have a return to office initiative, that alone will not work unless you give something back to the people as well. So I think up to 70% of our respondents in our research do show that they are already in some kind of like in-office mandate situation, right? And then of course the top sectors are the tech, the banking and finance, and also education. So it is happening right now as we speak. Then how do they make meaning and make sense of it? Is they need to also complement it with more supportive environment, more wellness initiatives, and also maybe enhancing the amenities and the in-office experiences on top of your work kind of experience. There will be peer learning, there'll be sharing, career development. So all these actually have to come hand in hand. So no way is just mandating people to come 5 days a week without doing anything else is going to fly very well.
Yeah, because I'm glad you brought that up, because actually there is research to show that when you work from home, there are, or when you work out of the office, there are benefits to it. Like people have more time to manage their schedule between personal and work time, and they sleep better because, maybe they commute less and they have time to spend on that. So I think that's quite good, because I was going to ask, like, how can companies, are there tangible things that companies can do to bring people back without, because you're taking away the benefits of work from home in a way. Yeah,
so I think a lot of areas like enhancing wellness and also tangible sustainability effects such as access to green spaces or recharging spaces within the office. Like you said, you can't just be working non-stop, right? There should be detox moments, like be quiet, don't mess with me moments, where you can just retreat to in the office. And if the office environment is actually a conducive one, then it becomes pleasant. You have enough open spaces. And I think amenities, things like food always works. You'll be surprised. Food works wonders, right? Especially yummy food. And obviously, community-based experiences too. There are people who really thrive on these like social connections, right? So how can you give these opportunities or create these opportunities in the office so that people also feel like they have an extension of themselves beyond their homes, which is at the workplace. So it takes a lot of work, to be honest, to make this work. So in addition to policy, I think to NUS's point, I think the newsflash just came out. I think I'm curious to find out whether there are accompaniment kind of like appendices to the policy itself, because it can't just be a one-size-fits-all for sure. And I'm sure for 12,000 strong workforce, there will be considerations for different roles. And operationally, I think different roles also can be afforded different levels of flexibility. So I think I await NUS's response actually to this
some
matter.
Clarity.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing, and this stems from my experience working in a newsroom, right? One of the reasons to have people back in the office is people learn from osmosis. I learn from my more senior colleagues, and I also learn from younger people who have come into the newsroom. What, in particular for younger people, and that's how I learned when I started out as a new reporter, right? I learned from watching other people do interviews or talking to my boss and everything. So do fresh grads in particular lose out because they work from home? Like if they don't meet their senior colleagues or they don't experience what a workplace culture is like, will they lose out? And is it even important that they have all these learning by osmosis kind of things?
Yeah, I think that is quite a recent issue that came out, a bit of a concern, the Gen Zs, the younger staff. And I think there were studies relating it to COVID time where they didn't have the interaction, and then now their communication skills are pretty bad. They couldn't communicate properly with their colleagues back in the office and so on. So yes, so that could be an issue. But does it take 5 days a week, 7 days in the office just to develop that skill? I don't think so. I don't think it's so much the quantity of the time, but the quality of the time, right? So the new staff could be in the office full time without any meaningful interaction with their peers or bosses. So no skills will be developed. Compared to, it's a hybrid working arrangement. So when this new staff is back in the office 3 days a week, during that 3 days, it's a planned, structured, say, an orientation kind of process where you meet certain people, we discuss specific things, the person can communicate, develop those kind of skills.
So I'm hearing intentionality is very important.
Yeah, actually one of the top of my areas for leaders is the quality of mentoring, coaching, and how can it happen. So yes, in-person learning by osmosis is actually quite important. But again, it goes back to whether or not it's well designed. Yeah, and how are you creating those opportunities to happen? So bring back to the quality of management of teams. I think even coaching and mentoring itself takes a little bit of kind of anticipation of what works best for that person. Obviously, in-person brings a lot of benefit, but too much in-person may not work well as well. So it is that sweet spot. You really have to tailor it, and it takes a lot of time to design it. More importantly, I think for mentoring to happen, that trust and psychological safety, now we go back to the trust and the safety, it needs to be in place as well. So like in our own office, mentoring and coaching actually happens in open spaces in plain sight. One-on-one conversation actually happen right in front of where everyone walks past us.
And can hear?
And can hear. Oh. Yeah, but then you trust that when you see a one-on-one, you don't go so near and then like, listen. Yeah, so there's a little bit of that going on as well. So how do we reach that stage whereby we can actually have a one-on-one conversation where everyone can see us? That takes a lot of trust, and that takes a lot of practice as well. So I'm not saying just because you say, oh, we need to trust our people, then trust will happen. You literally need to practice it, and you need to lean in and say, hey, what if we try and then it doesn't work? Then we try another method. Yeah.
So I want to round off with this question about the consequences. If there are inflexible return to office mandates for both return to office mandates, right? What's the consequences for both employers and employees? Because in a way, it kind of is a tough job market at the moment. So do employees just have to play ball and say, yeah.
Yep.
Is that what?
I would say the employers run the risk of raising the good ones, the very mobile ones whose skills are very highly sought.
Yeah.
So they will say, I don't need to entertain this, right? It doesn't work for me. I can find another employer easily the next day. In fact, I already got 5 offers on my table. So the good ones will leave, which means you're left with the average ones, the okay ones, and that's not going to improve the business organizational outcomes.
Yeah, so I think in the short term, like you say, the market is not doing that well. I think talent retention may not be so apparently be affected. But then in the long run, in the midterm, yeah, you are going to lose the good ones for sure. But again, if the good ones are very good with their negotiation skills, then, they will be able to communicate their preferences. So again, back to your level of communication channel needs to be very open so that you do not lose the opportunity to kind of like retain or customize your arrangement for such individuals. Yeah.
So my takeaway is, one of my many takeaways from this conversation is have a two-way conversation with your boss and with your employee. Right?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you both for the conversation today. Hopefully it'll give our viewers something to think about. And that's it from The Usual Place. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss the next episode. And if you have thoughts on what we just discussed, do drop a comment on YouTube or talk to me on Instagram at The Usual Place Podcast. I'll see you next week on Thursday at noon.